Hello, kids. Today's story is an expedition on the spot back through time. This is New York City. New York hums and hurries, races and rumbles, from under its sidewalks to the sky up above. Buried in the earth, the subway travels to all parts of the city. Each day it takes millions of people to work and school. It plays on Broadway and 2 stories along Fifth Avenue. Cars and buses drive down busy streets. Trucks and taxis honk their way up crowded avenues. In the sky above, airplanes are bringing even more people to the city. About 8 million people live here. There are so many New Yorkers that if laid out head to toe, they would stretch all the way to California and back again. All these people help make New York one of the biggest, busiest cities in the world. But on this spot, $175 years ago, New York has a different city. Horse-drawn carriages bumped their way over cobblestone streets. Oil lanterns lit up its nights. Bakers and milkmen pushed their carts through the city. Some peddlers sold corn that was grown on farms along Fifth Avenue. Other peddlers sold water because city wells did not have enough for everyone. About 160,000 people lived in this New York, just enough if stretched out in a line to cross the neighboring state of Connecticut. There were chickens in almost every backyard. Mothers warned their children to stay away from the wild pigs that ran through the streets. And on this spot, 350 years ago, a fort and its cannons guarded the city of New Amsterdam. Windmill blades turned round and round, providing power to cut logs into boards for new houses and sailing ships. Fire wardens watched over the city's tall houses. Their leather buckets stood waiting to douse any blaze. After dark, a rattle watch took his turn on patrol. Walking city streets, he called out the hour, ready to sound his rattle at the first sight of danger. On the blackest of nights, when the moon was in hiding, every 7th house hung out a lantern to brighten his way. Fewer than 1,500 people lived in New Amsterdam, but 18 different languages echoed through its streets. Portuguese fur traders argued over prices. Dutch children shouted to playmates. French women visit with neighbors at the community row. If all these people stopped talking and stretched out a line, they'd form a human bridge between today's New York City and the Statue of Liberty in its harbor. And on this spot, 400 years ago, a great forest grew with walnut trees standing next to oaks and maples. Elk ate the grass. Bears gobbled blackberries from bushes and grapes from vines. Cougars and bobcats watched from the trees above. The Lenipes hunted in this forest for deer and wild turkey. In spring, they crossed through it to fish in the warm weather campsite by the firewood. One of those trails, which stretched north and south, eventually became a street named Broadway. And on this spot, 15,000 years ago, there was no forest at all. Cold winds blew across rocky hills. The winds and weather were so fierce that plants could not grow very tall. Instead, some of them grew in dense mats and hugged the ground. Growing so close together helped these plants keep warm. Each year, springs planted the hillsides in fresh, bright colors. New leaves splashed green against the brown branches of tiny birch and flowers filled in the season's rainbow: dandelion yellow, saxifrage purple, and rhododendron red. The Arctic fox and snowshoe hare wore new colors as well. They shed their winter white for grayish-brown coats to blend with their springtime surroundings. The woolly mammoth standing tall in the landscape did not need to worry about camouflage. And on this spot, 20,000 years ago, the weather was much colder. Ice wrapped the landscape in brisk white frozen blues and chilly greens. In June, as in January, slow-moving rivers of ice called glaciers covered the entire countryside. These glaciers were so thick that they would have buried today's tallest buildings. They were so heavy, the Earth's crust sank beneath their weight. And on this spot, 190 million years ago, a forest baked in the heat of endless summer. Evergreens shared the tropical sun with royal ferns that arched up as tall as trees. Pterosaurs spread their furry wings and swooped in the hot sunshine. Fabulosaurs nibbled on horsetail plants. An Amosaur stretched his long neck to get at some ginkgo leaves. Suddenly, a Dilophosaur crashed through the trees and bushes, her sharp fangs glistening. This dinosaur was looking for a different kind of meal. And on this spot, 220 million years ago, a group of coelophysis found over a dead fish near shore. Meanwhile, a phytosaur slipped into a shallow lake. When he opened his jaws, nearly 170 teeth swam across a giant amphibian called a metoposaur. Volcanoes smoked on the horizon. Clouds of steam billowed upward, rushing to meet the clouds in the sky. Lava spit out of some volcanoes. It oozed and bubbled from others. Sometimes the lava flowed in boiling rivers of melted rocks, so hot it took years to cool. Now and then glowing droplets shot up from the earth hundreds of feet in the air, just like water in a giant fountain. And on this spot, 300 million years ago, a mountain jabbed the clouds with its peak. The mountain was so high that plants and trees could not grow all the way up its sides. It was so high that the air up top was thin and hard to breathe. This mountain was part of a range taller than any mountains in the United States today. Peak after peak were crowns of snow against the blue sky. And on this spot, 370 million years ago, waves rolled across a tropical sea. Coral reefs grew up from the sea floor below. Gardens of sea lilies swayed in the water like flowers bending in the breeze. But these sea lilies were really animals that strained tiny creatures out of the water for food. Giant squid-like animals housed in shells used their arms to walk on the sea bottom. Their arms also grabbed trilobites and other animals for dinner. Large sharks swam in these waters. They were hunted by uneven bigger fish. A dinnicty, or terrible fish, was about 30 feet long. Its jaws could crush a victim with one snap. But on this spot, 540 million years ago, there was no sea, there was no mountain, there was no animals or insects or green leaves reaching for the sun. This spot was only rock as far as the eye could see. Except for a dusting of algae, this spot looked a lot like the surface of our moon. Things change over thousands and millions of years. The earth changes. Huge pieces of land pull apart, leaving holes big enough to form oceans. Seas dry up, leaving fossils to tell the story of another time. Huge pieces of land press together. The mountain pushed toward the sky. Giant glaciers bulldoze some of those mountains. Wind and water crumbled others, one rock at a time. Over hundreds and thousands of years, people lived lives changed as well. Some of their cities disappear into history. Others, like New York, are still growing and changing. Long ago, kites were the only things people could fly high into the sky. Today, we launch spaceships. Our world and the way we live in it will continue changing. First a little, then a little more. Life will be quite different when your children have children of their own. Think of the moon that lights up our night. Astronauts have walked its surface, but going there still seems as distant as a dream. And in 100 years, who knows? On that thought, that's the end of our story today. Please subscribe to our channel. I hope you like it.